Hi, I'm Len Rydell, Executive Director of the Blue and Gray Education Society. In 1995, when you're in Mississippi and you're talking about the Civil War, there's no place you can walk. There is no element of the war in Mississippi. Indeed, there is no aspect of the Vicksburg campaign that you can address without bringing prominently into the discussion the name of Ed Bars. I have introduced Ed previous to this in the 7 Days campaign. And for those of you who didn't watch this or who are on another planet or have no idea who Ed Bars was, the sainted man passed away at the age of 97 and a half in September of 2020, much to the regret of all that knew him. And he ironically is buried near the Vicksburg campaign in Mississippi with his beloved wife, Margie. But Ed earned his water wings at Vicksburg. It was his first real operational assignment in the National Park Service going back to the end of the 1950s, early 1960s. Indeed, if you go back and look in the National Geographic series that did the Civil War centennial, Bars is mentioned back in 1963, I think it was. And since then, because of his photographic memory, every component of this campaign, he put his imprimatur on. He never forgot anything. He had a photographic memory, and when he put all that together in his very disciplined, nearly 3,000 page, 3-volume campaign study, the Vicksburg campaign, that was published in the early 1980s, and which incidentally will be coming back into print. Right now, if you want a copy of it, you're going to pay upwards of $750 to $1,000 for the 3 volumes. Savas Beatty Publishing is going to bring it back into print here in the next year or two. It is not a hard or well written series. It is more disciplined and rote memory from the official records and so forth. There are certainly more colorful accounts, but it's a very comprehensive account, and you ignore Ed's trilogy at peril to your credibility. If you haven't read that and you're talking about the Vicksburg campaign, you don't really know the Vicksburg campaign until you've been to the School of Ed. So in doing that, I asked Ed to play a more prominent role in this particular program, and we asked him initially if he would give us a talk on the antecedents of the Vicksburg campaign. How did we get to that point? Ed took about an hour and a few minutes to do that, and it is a wonderful presentation, which I'm sure you'll enjoy. Please join me in welcoming Ed Bars.
The Baton Rouge Arsenal, and a battery fired a shot over a bow from down in front of Fort Hill. So we want to say the first military action at Vicksburg during the Civil War occurs on that night. The Confederates became concerned about Vicksburg and its role in the war as their defenses upstream and downstream from Vicksburg began to collapse. With the evacuation of the Gibraltar of the West, as it was called then, of course Vicksburg was disputed later, Columbus, Kentucky, on the 3rd of March 1862, the Union would move downriver and move against Island number 10 to where the Confederates had pulled back their river defenses. So there we have this one force moving from upstream, built an amphibious force built around the gunboat squadron under the Army control, commanded up until the 9th of May by Flag Officer Foote. You also have operating from the mouth of Mississippi upstream, the West Gulf Blockading Squadron, commanded by Flag Officer David Glasgow Farragut. The forces from below break through first, running by the batteries at Fort Phillip and Jackson, St. Philip and Jackson, capturing New Orleans, and a flotilla commanded by Commander Palmer starts up the Mississippi River. Baton Rouge falls, Natchez falls, and on the 19th of May, the fleet arrives below Vicksburg, and they demand the surrender of Vicksburg. The mayor of Vicksburg, Laz Lindsay, speaks to the civil population on refusing the demand to surrender, that Mississippians refuse to surrender and in essence, come teach them how. At this time, troops that have been in the New Orleans area have reached Vicksburg. Now, the reason the Confederates focused on the defense of Vicksburg, it has rail connections with the east. The Southern Railroad ran from Vicksburg on east to Demopolis, Alabama. The important junction, of course, is at Jackson, where there's a north-south route, and Meridian, where there's a north-south route to Gulf, Mobile, and Ohio. The railroad running west out of Vicksburg was like from Tweedledee to Tweedledum. It went from, had little use. It went from DeSoto Point over to beyond Monroe, Louisiana. But the Vicksburg, having this railroad on the river, touching the river here, and the Red River country, having a number of steamboats up it, is a route of communication as long as they can hold Vicksburg, and eventually as they will occupy Port Hudson in August. As long as the Confederates hold that stretch of the river, the Confederates will be tied in via the Red River with the Trans-Mississippi. The Confederates refuse to surrender, and the fleet waits until Farragut arrives. Farragut comes upriver on his flagship Hartford and takes a run on the 25th up by the Vicksburg Bluffs and takes one look at it. He's an old salt and deep water sailor, and he does not like what he sees. He can realize there's high ground here. Being a deep water sailor, he knows that the Mississippi has many vagaries. It can rise as a powerful current. He's come up the river, he sees the levee system is broken down in a number of places, and he also knows in the summer the Mississippi is going to fall. So he gets back to New Orleans to communicate with Washington, leaving Commander Palmer behind and S. Phillips Lee with the fleet, with the lighter gunboat. And Washington is not happy with Farragut. Neither the Secretary of Navy, Father Neptune, Gideon Wells, or worse, the President of the United States. So in essence, they will tell him to get his tail back upriver, and he will this time go upriver with military support commanded by General Williams, who has been detached from Ben Butler's forces. Meanwhile, the Confederates are using the high ground at Grand Gulf. Now, as we enter the area here, you have the Good Bluffs. They begin south of Clear, Illinois, follow the Mississippi southward as far as the area of Memphis. Then they swing to the east, following along the east side of the Tallahatchie Yazoo watershed, strike Mississippi and Vicksburg, and follow the Mississippi southward generally as far as Baton Rouge, where they turn eastward. Now, where they strike the river again south of Vicksburg is at Grand Gulf. Grand Gulf has been a somewhat important river town, but by the time of the Civil War, it was decaying rapidly. There had been plagues of yellow fever, cyclones, etc., which is documented, the social historians, on the tombstones in Grand Gulf. So the Confederates, the Brookhaven artillery, began firing on Union gunboats, and particularly first on unarmed transports. The Navy does not like this very well, and on the 5th, Commander DeCamp lands and gives them a warning and burns a couple of buildings. When Farragut comes back up the river with his fleet and supporting infantry, they will put the infantry ashore, running them in steamboats. See how you could not get a rowboat in in low water up the Bayou Pierre. But at that time, you could take steamboats up the Bayou Pierre as far as the railroad bridge on the railroad connecting Grand Gulf and Port Gibson. And they land there and occupy and burn Grand Gulf, except for several buildings. I always like to belittle our people in the East. If you go to Savage's Station, you will see an interpretive marker there announcing that that is the first gun used on the 29th day of June and on a railroad. But I hate to say, at Grand Gulf, was not as an elaborate one, but it's still a gun mounted on a flat car, protected by cotton bales that fire on the Yankee troops. So I always like to twit my Virginia friends a little bit on that occasionally on their historical markers. Well, Farragut comes upriver. He will, on the 28th, do the same thing that he did at the ports below New Orleans. He will take his fleet, cast off, and fight his way by Vicksburg. 3 of his vessels will be the same as below New Orleans. 3 of his vessels will be turned back, but the majority of the fleet, including the flagship, pass. Meanwhile, from upstream, island number 10 is fallen, surrendering on the 8th of April. You see why John Pope goes east. With the loss of less than 75 men, he captures 7,000 Confederates. At Shiloh, we know what the losses were on either side. They'll then move downriver and move against Fort Pillow. The Yankee fleet will be surprised at Plum Point Bend on the 11th, and they will prove then that they can do something that we have more trouble doing in the 1960s. They put 2 of the Union ironclads on the bottom and raised them, and the Yankees raised them within a fortnight, and we can see that with the Cairo, we did not do near as well as they could do then. With the fall of Corinth, cutting the rail communications to the east from Memphis, on the night of the 4th, the 3rd, and the 4th, the Confederates evacuate Fort Pillow, and on the 6th, the Yankee fleet appears before Memphis, and as 10,000 people assemble on the bluffs to watch the great Confederate victory, which the morale has been buoyed up by Plum Point Bend, but they can soon hear the groans and the shrieks from the bluffs of Memphis as the Confederate river defense fleet is set to the bottom except for 1 vessel, and Memphis falls. On the 1st of July, Captain Davis, who has replaced Foote as commander of the Mississippi Flotilla, arrives above Vicksburg. At this time, for practical purposes, you could say the Confederates control only 3.5 miles of the Mississippi River. That section of the river immediately in front of the Vicksburg bluffs. But the Confederates had been building in their ironclad program 2 ironclads at Memphis. Tennessee, no one has ever heard of. The first Tennessee, no one has ever heard of because she's abandoned. But Arkansas is all down, towed down the Mississippi River, up the Yazoo, first to Greenwood, then finally to Yazoo City, where she's completed. Also, Lincoln has got into the act. Butler is an innovator, although he is not here. Lincoln remembers from his 2 voyages to New Orleans in his flatboating days, one from when he was living in Indiana and one when he was living at New Salem, that the Vicksburg is on this horseshoe bend. So they've concocted the idea of cutting a canal, which Perry's going into, across the base of DeSoto Point. They're working on that, but the Mississippi River is falling very rapidly, and there's no blowers down the engine room, so you can't keep up a head of steam. And on the 15th day of July, the ironclad Arkansas comes down the Yazoo River. Commander Watt turns tail, exposing the fantail of Arundel, its weakest part to Arkansas, and Arkansas debouches out into the Mississippi River, catching the Union fleet with not the pants down, but their steam, with no heads of steam, and she will fight her way through the fleet and anchor in front of Vicksburg. That night, Farragut repasses Vicksburg, attempting to destroy Arkansas. Until the 24th, he will use various stratagems to try to eliminate Arkansas, all the time noticing that the Mississippi is falling rapidly. And on the 24th and 25th, Farragut will take his fleet and return downriver, leaving several vessels under Dirty Bill Porter, David Dixon's half-brother, and at Baton Rouge, while the rest of the fleet returns to New Orleans. With the withdrawal of the Deepwater fleet to New Orleans and Baton Rouge, the river fleet goes back to Helena and Memphis. The forces under General Curtis, victorious over Van Dorn. I always look at Dennis Fry and I think of General Van Dorn at Pea Ridge, has then marched, failed to take Little Rock and established a base or a fortified enclave. We have fortified enclaves, as you notice, in the Civil War, long before McNamara and his fortified enclave in Vietnam. So they have this enclave at Elma. So the Confederates now, as part of their great counteroffensive that reaches from Tidewater, Virginia, to the Indian Territory, seize the initiative here. And General Breckinridge moves against Baton Rouge. Arkansas's engines fail. She does not keep her rendezvous. And on the 5th, Breckinridge attacks, drives in the Union forces, kills General Williams, but in view of the fire of the Union gunboats, pulls back. Arkansas shows up the next day after repairing her engines, seeing Dirty Bill coming up river in Essex. Stevens, who's acting commander of Arkansas, destroys her, but Breckinridge, undaunted, moves to Port Hudson and fortifies Port Hudson. This again gives the Confederates these two bastions, Vicksburg in the north, Port Hudson in the south, that tie them to the Trans-Mississippi via the Red River. Forget all about that railroad from DeSoto over to the Monroe and beyond, because they don't even repair the bridges over at this time. Well, the Union first attempt against Vicksburg has failed. In November of 1862, the Union will make their second thrust to Vicksburg. There have been changes in command. The command is changing down, the guard is changing down in Louisiana. All good Louisianans, favorite Union general, Benjamin Franklin Butler, is being recalled, soon to be replaced by the Union general with the most nom de guerres that I know of, ranging from this political name of the bobbin boy from Waltham to dancing master and old commissary Nathaniel Banks. Grant has come out of eclipse following Shiloh, and Halleck's call to Washington to become general-in-chief, and he is preparing a campaign to open the Mississippi, operating downstream, while when Banks comes out with his new regiments, many of them 9-month regiments, will operate from the south. We will not talk about, we'll talk about the relationships between the two in very little, except for presentations, because they never get together, really. So General Grant, in his first attempt, will plan a traditional overland campaign. Concentrating his troops, 3 wings, he will move southward, Sherman from Memphis, Hamilton, no one hears about because he soon vanishes from the picture, from Corinth, and Grant from the area of Bolivar. They'll move down the railroad. As they do, the Confederate forces under a new leader, General John C. Pemberton, who we'll hear more about, has arrived from South Carolina to take command of the Department of Mississippi and East Louisiana. General Van Dorn, the native Mississippian, is under extreme fire. He suspended the writ of habeas corpus in the state. It also proved himself not too successful as an infantry, as a commander of infantry forces. So Grant will push south, but now politics enter into this scheme. Now, one of the next senior man in Grant's army at the Battle of Shiloh had been a surviving man, had been John A. McClernand. McClernand had lived 2 blocks from Lincoln back in Springfield. He was a war Democrat and had sat in Congress. He had fought under Grant at Belmont. He had fought under Grant at Donelson and at Shiloh. If you look at Lincoln in his pictures when he visits McClellan after the Battle of Antietam, McClernand is in the picture. He's a rather undistinguished, short, wiry man, off on the right, on the left of the picture. What he was doing in Washington at that time, the Battle of Antietam, he and the original Tricky Dick, Governor Yates of Illinois, had gone back east. They were talking, McClernand had little use for West Pointers. And he knew the feeling of the people of the old Northwest, probably best emphasized by another member of the Democratic Party who had cast his lot with the Union. He was the other one was a dope-face. We'll hear lots about him in the next 3 days. That's John A. Logan. A dope-face, he always voted with the Southern Democrats on sectional issues. But with the secession of the states in the Mississippi Valley, he realized the importance of the Mississippi Valley to his voters, and he will warn his fellow Democrats, Mississippi, Louisiana, etc., as they leave Washington. The people of the old Northwest will hew their way to the Gulf with bayonets. So McClernand is talking in Washington and informing the political leaders, Yates is backing, that what we need to do is operate along the line of Mississippi. The fall elections are coming up. I'll go back and campaign and raise troops. And I will be in charge of them. We'll assemble them around Memphis. And Lincoln undoubtedly said yes in their conversations. Talent, however, is he may be jealous of Grant, but he's more loyal to Grant than he is John A. McClernand. McClernand also, as he makes speeches and the troops begin assembling at Memphis, he also gets some men that have served in Western Virginia in the Department of Kanawha. He also gets a number of men that he also has available the troops assembling at Elman. McClernand, unfortunately for himself, is a widower. And at this time he decides to marry his sister. He sets the wedding too late for his own welfare, sets the wedding for the day before Christmas. Grant, by this time, has marched south. He has reached the line of the Tallahatchie River. Long before Liddell Hart discovered the indirect approach, Grant launches one. He will send a force out of Helena, Arkansas, the land on the Mississippi side of the river, near Friars Point. And they will cross the Delta. There's the Delta down in New Orleans, below New Orleans, in Louisiana. But if you're in Mississippi, the Delta begins in Catfish Row in Vicksburg and ends in the lobby of the Peabody in Memphis. Bounded on the east by the Tallahatchie and the Yazoo watershed, and on the west of the Mississippi. Along the natural levees of the Delta are very prosperous plantations. In fact, Wade Hampton, whether he's the biggest slaveholder in the South or not, it's been cast doubt on, but his biggest number of blacks are in Issaquah County, his largest plantation owners. So this area, but it's all communication north and south by river. Deer Creek, Steele's Bayou, Black Bayou, Big Sunflower, Little Sunflower. Only 2 roads cross the Delta from east to west. So Haley, with Colonel Washburn in command of his cavalry, crossed the upper Delta, threatened Grenada. With this threat to the support of the rail lines and the bridge of Grenada, the Confederates abandoned the line of the Tallahatchie and fall back behind the Appalachian. The clouds break like they did yesterday here, and the rain pours down for 4 or 5 days. Grant pushes forward slowly as far as the Oconee, the Yakima. Cavalry will follow as far as Coffeyville, where they will be beaten up by Confederate infantry. Grant has now learned from Halleck about McClernand's mission. And Halleck has indicated to Grant, if McClernand has not come forward yet, he can use these troops. So Grant on the 10th sends Sherman back from College Hill, near Oxford, where this is, to Memphis with 1 division. You pick up the troops at Memphis, pick up the division at Helena, and proceed down the river. The converging attack. Grant overland, Sherman making use, borrowing McClernand's men, moving down the river. Now, Grant gets in deeper trouble. Bedford Forrest will cross the Tennessee River between the 15th and 17th of December at Clifton. Right westward on the 18th at Lexington, Price, the 11th Illinois Cavalry, and capture the great agnostic, who learns of the fallacy of drawing inside straits while he's a prisoner of the Confederates and is relieved by his plan. Forrest will then show why Sherman is concerned about him in 1864. Forrest will rip up the railroad, Mobile, Ohio, Grant's supply line between Jackson, Tennessee and Union, Tennessee. And then the first railroad through train will not run over that route until the middle of the 2nd week in March. That's how you're supposed to wreck a railroad, not tear up a few rails. At the same time, Van Dorn, finding his true niche as a leader of cavalry, will sweep down and destroy Grant's immediate supply base at Holly Springs. Sherman sails from Memphis on the 20th. His rear division under Morgan L. Smith doesn't leave till evening of the 20th. At that time, Sherman knows that Forrest is raising hell in West. On the evening before he sails on the 20th, a score of mud-bespattered cavalrymen ride into Memphis and will tell Morgan L. Smith that Van Dorn is an ice. Sherman, in his memoirs, forgets this. Because what? He He heard it, and it's documented that he knew it on the 21st from his conversations with Smith. Also, in a hurry to get away from Memphis, Sherman leaves behind half the Pottons. I use Pottons because no less than Maxwell Taylor corrected me. If you're in the Army engineers, it's Pottons. If you're a civilian, it's pontoon. And he comes down the river. All right, Grant, the supply base destroyed, the railroad in shambles, disengages, and begins pulling back from Vicksburg across the Tallahatchie. As soon as that occurs, we will hear from some of our other speakers, Davis and Johnston have been here, in Vicksburg, in Jackson, and they'll spend Christmas Day up at Grenada. So the Confederates, with the Grant pulling back, used their interior rail line. The Mississippi Central, New Orleans, Jackson, and Great Northern to ship men from Grenada, Jackson, Vicksburg. Also, I'm sure some of you would come up with some of the other presentations. Davis had made a great mistake. Would be saying that in this building. But maybe Bragg wouldn't have used these men right anyway. Because while he was visiting the Army of Tennessee on the 11th and 12th, he had ordered 10,000 men from Bragg's command to Mississippi. Already, the advance contingents of those troops are arriving in the Jackson-Vicksburg area. You can always speculate that it might have been, if Bragg had had those 10,000 men at Stone's River, you'll also come up that he might have printed them away the same way he did the other men at Stone's River. So we get into might have been. So Sherman comes down, ascends the Yazoo River on the 26th, and begins disembarking at Johnson's plantation, 10 miles north of Vicksburg, on the Yazoo River. It's about 6 or 7 miles of level ground before you run into the bluffs. The bluffs' name are Walnut Hills. Chickasaw Bluffs, as any Mississippian knows, is at Memphis. What's down there is Chickasaw Bayou. Sherman will move slowly forward, the Confederate strength increasing hourly as the troop trains roll in. On the 27th and on the 29th is also a difficulty because the river is rising rapidly. And the men, the same as in Fort Henry, can look and see trees and see where the water has been on previous years, and they can probably eyeball it and see where it will soon be on them. So Sherman schedules a full-out attack on the 29th and shows he is familiar with Caesar. As he announces after the attack, I landed at the time appointed, assaulted, and failed. 1,776 men have been killed, wounded, and missing. The Confederates have lost 206. The water continues to rise. Sherman stays around to the 1st, coming up with some wild dreams of loading assault troops and going up and crashing the raft at Snyder's Bluff. The water continues to rise, and he leaves. Meanwhile, the irate bridegroom has arrived with his bride at Milliken's Bend. And on his arrival, he pulls out his orders and reorganizes Sherman's force into 2 corps, giving one to a fellow Democrat, George W. Morgan, the other to Sherman. And they move upriver against Arkansas Post. Arkansas Post has been used by the Confederates as a base from which to send steamboats to attack Union shipping on the Mississippi River. So they will move against Arkansas Post. Now, McClernand isn't the dunderhead that Sherman and Porter would think we are. Or else he has Alzheimer's disease. because on the way down, he had discussed with General Gorman and Hellman just such an operation. Both Sherman and Porter will both say in their memoirs that he had no idea. Regardless of whose idea it is, or McClernand did or did not have Alzheimer's disease, they move upriver, and on the 11th, force the surrender of 6,000, almost 6,000 Confederates at Arkansas Post. Grant at first is a little unhappy with this. He comes down and he's worried that McClernand is about to go on a so-called wild goose chase up into Arkansas. So Grant reaches his decision now. He knows he ranks McClernand. Grant and Halleck has told him that when their forces are together, Grant will command. So Grant's decision now, as his troops reach Memphis, is to leave one corps to hold West Tennessee under Stephen A. Earlbuck and move the rest of his forces downriver to operate against Vicksburg. By the 30th of January, Grant has established his headquarters in the Milliken's Bend. At Milliken's Bend, Sherman's troops have gone into camp, having returned to Arkansas Post, in the area of Young's Point. McClernand, who has replaced Morgan, who was sent back to Ohio, will camp the 13th Corps in the Milliken's Bend area, and as they come downriver, McPherson's 17th Corps, Hamilton having been shoved aside, will go into camp at Lake Providence. Now this is in the high water season, the area of heavy rain. Now Grant, during the next 2 months, will grope for a way to solve his problem. Grant's problem is he's on the west side of the Mississippi. The west side of the Mississippi is almost as flat as a pancake. Levees have been constructed back to Mississippi. The area to the west, if you work to the west, there is a series of old channels in the Mississippi. Again, like the Delta, these old channels in the Mississippi provide communications north and south along the banks of these channels, and some of them old lakes are very rich plantations. But you get back several miles from the waterways or lakes, you're in the swamps. So as Terry will be telling you, one of his opportunities is to build on the Williams Canal. They will begin work on that, and it will fail. While Sherman's men are providing the major working parties for the Williams Canal, now known as Grant's Canal because they slightly changed the axis, General McPherson will blast the levee separating the Mississippi from Lake Providence. They'll raise the water to Lake Providence, and it will discharge to the west through a series of bayous, Kennesaw Bayou, into Bayou Mason, Kennesaw River, Washita River, Black River, and into the Red River. This is a plan to send McPherson's 17th Corps from Lake Providence to join General Banks, who is operating out of New Orleans against Fort Hudson, the southern anchor. This does not succeed. A more interesting one is the one when he sends his young protege, James Harrison Wilson, up to Elm, Arkansas. Now, if you live in Greenwood, Mississippi, before 1856 and want to go to Memphis by boat, you would go up the Yazoo River to Greenwood, up the Tallahatchie, then up Coldwater River, then through Yazoo Pass, Moon Lake into the Mississippi, and then to Memphis. Small steamboats would go this route. But in 1856, to open more land for cultivation in the upper Delta, a levee had been constructed across the mouth of Yazoo Pass. Wilson goes up and surveys it. He has a naval force going up under Watson Smith, who Wilson will soon be saying is no Lord Nelson. They look at the levee, draw working parties out of Helena, General Gorman, and on the 3rd they place a mine in the levee and detonate it. The levee is crevassed, and Wilson will say the water pours through the crevasse with the force of Niagara Falls. It's 7 days before the water ceases gushing through the crevasse as the water on the east side of the levee begins to reach equilibrium with that in the Mississippi. They then go through Yazoo Pass and into Moon Lake. The lake's about 7 miles long, horseshoe, half a mile to a mile across. Large enough they'll anchor the whole fleet on. But then they have to clear out 15 miles of the pass to reach the Cold Water. So the troops go to work. Winches grind. Men work up to their armpits in the water. It's going to be the end of February before they clear out Yazoo Pass. And of course, these steamboats, you know, the trademark is these tall chimneys that they have. And the overhanging trees will come sweeping down and bust the chimneys up. In fact, one of the light draft gunboats, Romeo gets damaged, and Juliet will get damaged so bad they can't go down. And the cold water, and Wilson is getting very disturbed. He's given a division of troops to work with him, headed by General Ross. The Confederates, however, are not dead. They know what the Yankees are doing. They have sent men up the Yazoo Pass, and while the Yankees are working on the west side, the Confederates on the east side of the pass, chopping trees to fall, to block it. They also rushed General Loring, old Blizzard. Now Loring is 10 years younger than Robert E. Lee. He was an Eagle Colonel years before Robert E. Lee was an Eagle Colonel. You see some of Loring's problems. He had been an Eagle Colonel when Pemberton was a captain. So he is rushed to Fort Pemberton, to Greenwood, and establishes Fort Pemberton, and the gunboats, commanded by Wilson, is now beside himself by this man who is no Nelson, nor a Rodney, reach Fort Pemberton and attack on the 11th, or repulse, beat the attack on the 13th, repulse, on the 16th, repulse. At this time, Vicksburg papers are championing, we trapped the Yankees. Soon forced to surrender. Now, Grant, like all our Lee, or all good generals, read the newspapers. The enemy, because there was little or no censorship. And he reads the gloating articles in the Whig about the Yankee failure and about to have 4,000, 5,000 Yankee prisoners, a bunch of them gunboats. Now they come to the final act. Porter, able but bombastic, reckless handler of the truth, will take a tug with Grant into the Yazoo, go up Steele's Bayou. Now, plenty of water. Steele's Bayou parallels the Mississippi at a distance about 10 miles east. Of about 30 miles, there's a connecting stream, Black Bayou, that goes through the Deer Creek. Now, you Mississippians know you couldn't get a motorboat down Deer Creek now. But in those days, it was now. That's how these planters got their crops out. Grant likes what he sees. Now, their plan is to send the gunboats, ironclads, a number of ironclads, tin-clads, and troops. Up. System of waterways to Rolling Fork. The Rolling Fork, they'll go through on Rolling Fork into the Big Sunflower, come down the Big Sunflower, puts them in fact upstream from the Confederate defenses at Snyder's Bluff and Drumgool's Bluff. And they can either turn against Vicksburg, reach the high ground of Vicksburg, or go upriver to Fort Pembroke. Sherman will support it, landing his troops at Eagle Bend. All good fishermen in Mississippi know where Eagle Bend is. They'll march across from Eagle Bend, Black Bayou, then board transports. Porter starts it. All goes well. He reaches Deer Creek in one day. Black Bayou is a different, lot of difficulties. Only 2 miles long. They have to use the ironclads to bump into trees, and Porter, you have to watch what Porter says. It says that denizens of the forest come down on the decks, and they have to have people sweeping off the decks, particularly when they get a big water moccasin coming down. And cool. The Confederates now rush Samuel Wang Ferguson, West Point graduate, 1859, South Carolinian. 2, he's up at Greenwood. He's rushed to Rolling Fork. Indian Mountain's still there. Union approached the Indian Mountain. Confederate reinforcements rushed up Deer Creek from Vicksburg, begin arriving in the area. Soon Porter has to back up. So they have to unship their rudders and begin fighting. Porter's damn glad to see Sherman arrive, because he's had all of the narrow bayous he wants. By the 28th, the expedition is back at Young's Point, Milliken's Bend. Now they have failed 4 times in the swamps of Mississippi and Louisiana. Grant's Canal, Lake Providence Canal, Yazoo Pass, and Steele's Bayou. Now we're at the point we're going to pick up on our tours in detail. Grant is at a crossroads of his career. By the 29th of March, he sees 3 alternatives. An attack directly across the river on Vicksburg. He rejects this as a Fredericksburg or worse. He can adopt a policy advocated by his 2 favorite corps commanders, Sherman and McPherson, and return to Memphis and resume his advance overland. Or he can reconnoiter a route through the Louisiana parishes, through southward, through Richmond, by Lake St. to ruin to hard times landing and to Carthage. So on the 29th, he tells General McClernand, his least favorite corps commander, but the only one that seemed to think anything could come of this route, will move out with a reconnoitering force and see if they can open a road from the Milliken's Bend, Young's Point area southward along Roundaway Bayou, Bayou Vidal Lake to Carthage, where they will embark and cross the river. So we will leave General McClernand moving out to make his reconnaissance, and we'll pick them up on site when we get down to Grand Gulf, where they arrive on the where they arrive for their bombardment on the 29th of April. Thank you.
We got 10 minutes for questions.
For questions, okay. 10 minutes for questions. I thought I did, but I didn't want to intrude on territory. 10 minutes for questions. Yes, sir.
Not coming back up the floods that he couldn't get up the river.
All right, McBurry comes up here on the race of reconnaissance on the 25th and the 26th. First, he questions the ability of his guns to shell the city into surrender. But the main thing he's worried about is he comes upriver. The river is very high at that time. A number of levees have crevets. In fact, if he comes upriver, Hartford goes out into a field. And he sweats out ever getting Hartford out of that field. There's enough water to float her, but his vessel, he's particularly afraid of losing his three big ships, Brooklyn, Richmond, and Hartford, on the Mississippi River. So he's worried on navigation. Decides it's not worth the risk, so he takes his big ships, goes back to New Orleans, leaves his smaller vessels up here. But when he gets back to New Orleans, the president and his secretary have him. He is one. Then when he goes out here the second time, the river is then falling, and he's darn afraid he's going to lose not only his three big ships, but his corvettes as well here. And it's a feeling of a deep sea sailor being on the Mississippi River, first in rapidly rising waters, and then in rapidly falling waters.
Well, yeah, it has to do with the spring of 63, the decision to send Porter by south down.
All right, well, by the time of 63, Farragut decides to pass Port Hudson. On the night of the 14th and 15th, he takes 7 vessels, but only 2 pass, Hartford and Alabama. The others are turned back with the loss of Mississippi. He then comes up with, as we'll learn this afternoon, he goes by Grand Gulf. At that time, the Confederates are beginning to put heavy guns in. They get good hits on him. He goes upriver, confers with Porter. He arranged to drift coal barges down by Vicksburg to Coley. And he decides his correct path is to blockade mouth of Red River, because the Confederates have a number of boats up Red River, and by blockading mouth of Red River, he cuts reinforcements from the trans-Mississippi from reaching either Port Hudson or Vicksburg. So then it becomes up to Porter to secure the river between Vicksburg and mouth of Red River.
This was a cooperative venture between Farragut and Porter.
Yes.
That's one thing that wasn't very clear to me in some of the previous.
Yeah, it's a cooperative venture. If Farragut got all his ships through, they would probably operate heavier against Port Hudson. But his main role is to blockade mouth of Red River.
Can you tell me, like, why Grant would not have chosen to go back to Memphis and come overland?
Well, Grant would not go back to Memphis and go overland. I think that would be, Grant never liked to take a step back. Besides his own feelings on taking a step backward, he could see that a step backward, 200 miles, and then an advance southward would be interpreted in Washington by McClernand's friends and people and others that he was another failure, that he had pulled back. Also, he would have to worry about the Confederate cavalry attacking his supply lines as he moved southward. He had not reached the stage, he would not, because it's a devil lot further from Memphis to Jackson than it is, and keeping a regular operator, than it is. And you run into this problem that, according to the quartermasters, if you went over 14 days from a railroad or a river port, your hay burners would burn up more fuel than they could carry to go 14 days out and 14 days back. Because horses and mules burn up a lot more forage than internal combustion machines. Because the Germans, Goering got in trouble because he couldn't deliver 600 tons a day in stock. Sherman needed 3 times that. They needed over 1,200 tons to keep his army functioning, and the Sixth Army is a hell of a lot bigger than Sherman's army in Georgia.
You mentioned the gunboats that were facing Warren. What happened to them?
Which ones?
The gunboats and the troops that were facing Warren, that the Vicksburg papers were saying were trapped.
Okay. They would, all right, as soon on the 18th, Ross gave up the expedition. Smith had a nervous breakdown. And they go back upriver, and they meet another division coming in, Quinton. They then go back down, and then at the end of March, having just made a new decision, they're withdrawn up the Helmand.
They weren't cut off. Really.
No, they weren't cut off. It's just that the paper is always, it's a part of newspapers that they always exaggerate successes and gloss over setbacks. Papers don't change. Yes, sir.
As far as, why wasn't Natchez more defended due to the society and the officers that came?
All right, the question is, why wasn't Natchez defended? Why did the Confederates make their defense on Vicksburg? Primarily because the Confederate military chose Vicksburg. Maybe Mayor Lindsay wouldn't have been so defiant if there hadn't been Confederates in Vicksburg, Confederate soldiers. The fact is that the Confederate military, because of the railroads coming in from the east, chose to make their stand at Vicksburg. If there had been a railroad coming in from Natchez from the east, they might have chosen Natchez instead to keep them further out. And then, if the military had made that decision, granted, maybe a number of the property owners wouldn't have liked it, but they would have still had to pull to it.
Well, why did the railroad bypass Natchez? That was really not.
Well, they did not. Natchez had not organized to build a railroad link with the north-south New Orleans and Jackson. New Orleans and Jackson, the Great North. They had not got their act together to get a railroad chartered and constructed, whereas Vicksburg had. In fact, the Vicksburg Railroad started in the 1830s. Get one more and then I'll go on to the truth on terror.
Grant is like referring so much. Why did it appear that he leaped off McClernand's corps more so than Sherman?
All right, on the advance south, he supports the idea. He likes the idea. The other two corps commanders don't. And McPherson would have been difficult to let lead because he's at Lake Providence. So McPherson's going to lead. You're going to have to ship him from Lake Providence to Milliken's Bend and Young's Point. McClernand is also the best position to lead because the 13th Corps is around Lake Providence. Excuse me, is around Milliken's Bend. And the road network favors a movement from Milliken's Bend over Young's Point for most of Sherman's men. So McClernand is in a better position, even if you wanted it. And also the other corps commanders had expressed grave reservations. So it's always difficult. You could be like Washington at the Battle of Monmouth, putting Charles Lee in command, who wanted to give the British the golden parachute to Sandy Hook, placing a man who wanted to let the British escape, suddenly changing his mind since he's going to have over half the army. Washington acceding to let a man who does not believe in what Washington wants take the lead. That's what happened. Okay.
Thanks, Ben. Our next speaker, I'm sorry, it's not.
Vicksburg Railroad started in 1830.
If,
I get one more and then I'll go on to the truth on Charles.
Grant is like referring so much. One that appeared that he leaped off referring to Ford more so than Sherman.
All right, that on the advance south, he supports the idea. He likes the idea. The other two Ford commanders don't. And sure, and McPherson would have been difficult to let him leave because he's at Lake Providence. So McPherson's going to leave. You're going to have to shift him from Lake Providence to Milliken's Bend and Young's Point. McClernand is also the best position to leave because the 13th Corps is around Lake Providence. Excuse me, is around Milliken's Bend. And the road network favors a movement from Milliken's Bend over Young's Point for most of Sherman's men. So McClernand is in a better position, even if you wanted it. And also the other corps commanders expressed grave reservations. So it's always difficult. You could be like Washington at the Battle of Monmouth, putting Charles Lee in command, who wanted to give the British the golden parachute to Sandy Hook, placing a man who wanted to let the British escape, suddenly changing his mind since he's going to have over half the army. Washington acceding to let a man who does not believe in what Washington wants take the lead. That's what happened now. Okay?
Thanks, Ben. Our next speaker, I'm sorry, Nathan,